Every single second, your body is like this bustling city with trillions of cells all working together. But what happens when some of those cells get pushed way past their limits? Today, we're going to dive into the really dramatic story of cell injury and the two very, very different paths a cell can take when it finally hits a breaking point.
So this is the big question, right? When a cell is just totally overwhelmed, it has a choice to make. Does it kind of die quietly and slip away? Or does it go out with a massive bang, causing a huge mess for all its neighbors? The answer is a huge deal for everything from a tiny paper cut to a major heart attack.
Okay, here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about what cell injury actually is. Then we'll peek inside the cell to see the crazy chain reaction it kicks off. After that, we'll get into the two main outcomes, the total chaos of necrosis and the super neat and tidy self-destruction of apoptosis. And finally, we'll put them head-to-head.
All right, let's jump right in with section 1, when cells get hurt. What does it really mean for a cell to be injured anyway?
Well, cell injury isn't just one simple thing. It's actually a whole spectrum of changes to a cell's shape and how it works that happen when it's under serious stress. You can think of it as a cell's version of being poisoned, overworked, or just physically beaten up.
And what's really wild is just how many ways a cell can get hurt. The threat can come from the inside, like a mistake in its own genetic code, or it can be an attack from the outside, like not getting enough oxygen, physical damage, or some invading virus. It's a constant battle out there for our cells.
Okay, so let's see how this all escalates. Once an injury happens, it can set off this absolutely devastating domino effect inside the cell. It's this cascade of failures that, if it isn't stopped, leads to a pretty final outcome.
And here's pretty much how that cascade plays out. It often kicks off with the cell losing its energy source, its ATP. Without power, things go wrong fast. The cell's pumps fail, calcium floods in, and that activates all these destructive enzymes. Then the mitochondria, the powerhouse, gets damaged, and pretty soon the cell's walls just start to tear apart.
So once the damage is irreversible, that's it. The cell has to go. The first path it can take is something called necrosis. And believe me, this is not a peaceful death. It is violent, chaotic, and incredibly messy.
Now, the crucial thing to get here is that necrosis isn't a solo act. We're talking about large groups of cells all dying at once. And as they swell up and burst, they spill all their guts out, triggering this huge inflammatory response in the tissue all around them. It is collateral damage on a microscopic scale.
But here's the thing. Not all necrosis is the same. Pathologists have actually identified different types, and how the dead tissue looks can give us huge clues about what caused the injury in the first place. So let's look at the three big ones. First up is coagulative necrosis, and it's the most common type. This is what you see in organs like the heart after a heart attack. The injury basically cooks the cell's proteins, which makes the whole tissue feel firm. That boiled egg analogy? It's perfect. The basic shape is still there, but the cell inside is totally non-functional.
Next, we have liquefactive necrosis. And here, powerful enzymes just completely digest the dead cells, turning the tissue into this, liquid goo. You see this in bacterial infections that form an abscess, and really importantly, this is what happens in the brain after a stroke.
And our third type is caseous necrosis. The name literally means cheese-like, and that is a disturbingly accurate description. It looks like this crumbly, yellowish-white debris. This right here is the classic sign of tuberculosis, where the tissue structure is just completely wiped out.
So you can see just how different these are, right? You've got firm tissue where you can still see the cell outlines, a liquid mess, or that structureless cheesy stuff. Each one is like a clue, pointing to a different cause and a different place in the body.
But cell death doesn't have to be this disastrous mess. There is another option, a much more elegant one. It's called apoptosis, and it's the cell's pre-programmed, super tidy exit strategy.
Apoptosis is, for all intents and purposes, cell suicide. It's this deliberate, highly controlled process where a cell just systematically takes itself apart from the inside out. And the whole point is to get removed without spilling any of its contents and causing all that inflammation. It's really the ultimate act of taking one for the team.
And here's how it pulls off such a clean exit. Instead of swelling up and bursting like in necrosis, the cell actually shrinks. Its outer membrane forms these little bubbles, and all its contents get neatly packaged up into what we call apoptotic bodies. Then, these little packages are just quietly gobbled up by immune cells, leaving absolutely no mess behind. Tidy.
What's so fascinating is that apoptosis is a totally normal part of life. It's actually how we get rid of the webbing between our fingers and toes when we're developing as embryos.
But it can also be triggered by disease or even by medical treatments, like when chemotherapy tells a cancer cell, hey, it's your time to go.
Okay, time to bring it all together. We've got the messy, inflammatory demolition of necrosis and the quiet, controlled self-destruction of apoptosis. Let's put them side by side and see the difference.
And this right here is the absolute core takeaway. Apoptosis is planned. It affects single cells, it involves shrinking, and it causes zero inflammation. Necrosis, on the other hand, is an accident. It affects huge groups of cells. It involves swelling and bursting, and it always causes a big, damaging, inflammatory mess. One is a surgical strike, the other is a bomb.
Yeah, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It all comes down to a fundamental battle between order and chaos, a quiet, controlled removal versus a violent, inflammatory collapse.
And that leaves us with this incredible, tantalizing question for the future. You know, in diseases like heart attacks and strokes, so much of the long-term damage comes from the inflammatory chaos of necrosis. So, what if we could develop drugs that could convince those dying cells to skip the messy path of necrosis and instead take the clean path of apoptosis? Could we fundamentally change how we treat some of the most devastating diseases we face? It's something to think about.